After direct material, I write down direct labor, which is 8,000 rupees. And now I cannot see any other direct expense here. Direct expense would have been any patent that the firm would have taken, which would directly be related to production or something like that. But there's no such value here. So we add these up and we get the prime cost. Now prime cost comes to 28,000 rupees, and now on the basis of the amount which we have for 1,000 units, we will calculate the cost per unit, which we are getting as 28 rupees. Now the next step is to calculate the factory cost or the works cost, and therefore I write down works overheads or factory overheads. You can use any term here, and we start recording the factory overhead. So please have a look. The first information directly after this is that there is some indirect labor cost in the factory. So I write down indirect labor, and the amount is 2,500. What you can do is you can record this amount in the inner column, and then finally we will post the amount of factory overheads in the outer column. After that, you are given some supervision cost. Now this cost is given separately, otherwise this also becomes part of the indirect labor. So this is 1,000 rupees. Factory premises rent. So rent of the factory is again indirect expense. Factory lighting expenses. So lighting. Oil for machines is indirect material. And then finally the depreciation of machines will also come here under the indirect expenses related to the factory operations. So here we are specifically given that the depreciation is of the machines. If there's any depreciation on office infrastructure, say office furniture, then that will go to the respective overhead, that is the office and admin overheads. So now I add this 500 here, and just continue to the format or next sheet. And we get the factory overheads. The sum total comes to 6,300, which I write down here. And after that, I get my works cost. Cost as 34,300. Using this, we can also now get the per unit works cost, which will be rupees 34.3. Let's continue and now add the office and admin overheads. So the office overheads are given as 8,000. Again, we write them in the inner column and then we'll post the total in the outer column. Then you are also given the office salaries, 2,000, and miscellaneous office expenditure, which is coming to rupees 1,000. This 11,000 is now the sum total of the office and admin overheads. You can also add the per unit overhead cost next to the value. So this is 11, and now we get the cost of production, which we are getting as 45,300, and this comes to 45.3 rupees. With respect to selling and distribution, we have only one overhead. Directly you are given the sum total of the selling and distribution overhead in the question. The amount is 6,000, so 6 rupees per unit, and I get my total cost of production. So this comes to 51,300 or 51.3 rupees. Now we need to add profit of 20%. A profit margin of 20% on the total cost of goods is expected on the sale of jeans. So if this firm is keeping a profit margin of 20% on the total cost, so plus profit, this is at the rate 20%, and this comes out to 10,260. So the profit per unit is 10 rupees 26 paisa. So accordingly, I write down what my final cost comes to. The final sales, it comes to 61560 or 61.56 rupees of selling price per unit. So this is how we make a simple cost sheet for the firm. The selling price per unit is 61.56 and the value of sales is 61,560. I hope this is clear to everyone. We
Yes,
have
ma'am.
just followed the format. I will also show you the format for the detailed cost sheet so that you can have a look at all the heads that we cover. The heads are the same, just with more subheadings or more overheads under each point. So I'll just quickly show you the format for the same. Okay, so this was a detailed format of cost sheet, and if you see, we are now starting with the opening stock of raw material, and there is also then the purchase of raw material given. So if you are given some opening stock of raw material, if you are given some closing stock of raw material, similarly there might be some opening and closing stock of finished goods with the firm, then how do we treat those in the cost sheet? So one thing in the cost sheet, when we start with the calculation of the direct material cost, then that becomes the sum total of opening stock plus purchases minus the closing stock. That will give you the cost of direct material consumed during the year. Opening stock of raw material plus purchases minus the closing stock of raw material. Then if there are any purchase returns, they will also be reduced there. If there's any loss in the raw material, that will also be reduced. After that, we are adding all the direct labor expenses, direct expenses like royalty or patent right that you are paying, and you are getting your first element under the cost sheet, which is the prime cost. After that, in the detailed format, more or less, you're given all the examples of factory overheads that we can find in the question. So, all this is given here. And then the new thing that appears here is if you have opening and closing stock of work in progress. So, before the final product is complete, before we get the finished good, we have work in progress. तो जब 0% काम हुआ होता है आपके raw material पे, 0% is raw material. You process the raw material, 100% job complete, that is your finished good. Anything in between these two is the work in progress. So if you have some opening and closing stock of work
Ma'am,
in
can you
progress,
repeat the work in
yeah,
progress?
I'll repeat. The raw material is one on which no processing has been done yet, no work has been done yet. फिनिश गुड पे 100% वर्क कंप्लीट हो गया. रॉ मटेरियल से फिनिश गुड तक आने में अगर कुछ पार्शल वर्क हुआ है, से 10% काम करा है रॉ मटेरियल पे, या 99% काम करा है रॉ मटेरियल पे, या 50% काम करा है, so now we can no longer call that as raw material. We call this as work in progress. So we are in the progress of coming to the finished goods. This work in progress will appear before we finalize the works cost, and we add any opening stock of work in progress that has come from the last year or last period, and any closing work in progress is reduced, and you get the works cost. Also, you see there's another term here, sale of waste or scrap. So any scrap, factory waste, factory scrap that is giving some revenue to the firm, that will reduce our cost, and hence it is reduced here before we get the final amount of works cost. So once we practice questions where we have these cases, things will get more clear. Then again, after this, after you've got the factory cost, next step is you are adding all the office and admin overheads. So examples are given here. This is more or less the same, but the new thing here is that after cost of production, you might have some opening stock and closing stock of finished goods. Opening stock that is coming from the last period and any closing stock of finished goods. So then again add the opening stock less the closing stock, and subsequent to this we adjust the selling and distribution overheads and we get the total cost. Then add the profit margin less the loss, if any, in the question, and you get the sales revenue. So if in the question say you are given this, the total cost, and then you are given the sales value, then the difference between the two will give you the profit or loss. So we'll take up questions where there will be missing values or where we are given the opening closing stock of finished goods, raw material. Then we'll be covering these aspects. So let's move to another question on cost sheet. So here you are. Yes, Rishabh, you have a doubt.
मैम, जो आप बोले
Hmm.
कॉस्ट कॉस्ट ऑफ डायरेक्ट मटेरियल कंज्यूम में
Hmm.
अब नॉर्मल लॉस ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल वो मैम लेस क्यों होगा उसमें?
क्यों?
ऐड
क्योंकि
होना चाहिए।
वो अल्टीमेटली आपका कॉस्ट का पार्ट नहीं बनेगा, अब नॉर्मल लॉस है। नॉर्मल प्रोडक्शन में अगर कोई रॉ मटेरियल की वेस्टेज होती है, वो कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन का पार्ट बनेगा। अब नॉर्मल लॉस से फायर हो गई फैक्ट्री में और उसकी वजह से रॉ मटेरियल डिस्ट्रॉय हो जाता है, तो वो यहाँ पे कॉस्ट का पार्ट नहीं बनेगा, वो आपका प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस में डेबिट होगा एज एन इनडायरेक्ट एक्सपेंस।
ओके मैम। मैम मतलब होगा लेकिन कहीं और।
हाँ हाँ, वो अकाउंट्स में कहीं ना कहीं उसकी एंट्री हो रही है, बट यहाँ पर जहाँ पर हम कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन कैलकुलेट कर रहे हैं या अपनी कॉस्ट ऑफ गुड सोल्ड कैलकुलेट कर रहे हैं, तो अब नॉर्मल लॉसेस यहाँ पर रिकॉर्ड नहीं होंगे।
ओके मैम।
Okay, so just take a minute, read about the question, what all information is given in the question. By that time, I'll prepare the format and then we can start with the question. So, number of units, I can't see number of units are given, so there's no point of preparing the cost per unit column. Okay, so now here you are given the opening and closing stock for raw material. So we will start with this point to calculate the direct material consumed. In the working notes, I will show you how we are breaking the manager's salary. In the last piece of information of your question, the manager's time is shared between the factory and the office in the ratio 20 is to 80. This question is from your book. 20% of manager's time and effort is devoted to the factory and 80% of his time goes in the office. So we need to break this amount of 96,000 in the ratio 20 is to 80, so which means that 19,200 of the total salary will come under the factory overheads, and the remaining part, which is 76,800, will come under the office overheads. So let's start with the question and start putting in all the values. Opening stock, so this amount will give you the direct material consumed. If there is any direct expense also related to the raw material, then that can be adjusted here. There is freight inward, so we will add freight inward here before we reduce the amount of closing stock. So because this is related to the transportation expense of bringing the raw material to the factory, so freight inwards will also be added here, and then I will reduce the amount of closing stock. So this freight inward is 64,000. So I get 20 lakh 64,000 as my direct material cost. Yes, Soumya.
Ma'am, can you please tell the amount of this purchases?
Purchases is material purchase 16 lakh 64,000.
Okay, ma'am.
ये आपके पास मटेरियल परचेज है ना बेटा यहाँ पर. Is this visible?
Ma'am, now it's visible.
Okay. Should I share the question with you if it's not clear here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just give me a minute. Or anyone who's having the book can share the question. Anyone is having the book? No? Give me a second. I'll have to open the book first. Okay, so then let's continue. After this, you get the direct material cost, which was calculated as 20 lakhs 64,000. We will now look for direct labor cost, which is just after this. Add the direct labor cost, 4 lakh 76,800. No other direct expenses given. So now we have our first cost, which is the prime cost, and subsequently we will be adding all the factory overheads here. This is 25 lakh 40,000 and 800. Yes, Soumya.
Ma'am, direct material cost is coming out to be 17 lakh 4,000.
Okay, I'll recheck the calculation. 2,76,000. Yes. So this is 17 lakh 4,000, and then 4 7. We have 21 lakh 80,800 here. Okay. Let's continue with the other overheads given. So I am making space for factory overheads and office overheads. So here let's keep the office overheads and selling distribution can be kept here. Okay, so the question is with all of you. I am also referring to the book now for the question. So after this, we have the indirect wages, which will become part of the factory overhead, and also the manager's salary that we had recorded. I'm first writing two pieces of information here. Manager's salary 19,200, which was 20% of the total amount given, and indirect wages are 32,000. These are first two indirect factory related labor expenses given to us. Then after that, in the question you're given salaries to administrative staff. This is part of the office overhead, 80,000. Then freight outward. Freight outward is when the finished goods are transported to the market from the factory or say some customer. So there these expenses will become part of your selling and distribution expenses. So under selling and distribution expenses, I write down freight outward and the amount is 40,000. Sales will come at the end. So we are already given the value of sales here, and accordingly the missing piece of information is the profit, which has also been asked in the question. After that, cash discount does not come in the cost sheet. When yesterday we were discussing the items which are excluded from cost, then cash discount was one of the items which do not appear in the cost sheet. So we will ignore this value. After that, we are given bad debts. They are part of the selling and distribution overheads. So 7,600 comes here. Repairs of plant. Harsh, you have a question or a doubt? Repairs related to the factory machinery will come here. 34,800. Then rent of the factory, and rent of the office comes under office overhead. Traveling expenses again relating to selling and distribution. The remaining 80% of manager's salary also we record here under the office expenses, office overheads. That was 76,800. Salesman's salary. So this is in continuation of the selling and distribution overheads. Then you are given depreciation for machinery and for furniture. Let's move back here. Directors' fees again will relate to office overheads. Factory electric expenses. And fuel for boiler is also part of our factory overheads. Now here you are given the sale of scrap 1,000 rupees. So before we come to the final amount of works cost, this sale of scrap will be reduced. Now you can show all these values in the inner column and then post the final amount in the outer column as the works cost. I will also shift this a bit like this. So now here I get my works cost, or factory cost, and then sale. After sale of scrap, the only thing that remains is general charges, which will again come under the office expenses. Cost of production. Please calculate the value of all the cost. This we get the okay, I'll just check the answers. 31,59,600. Okay, so we are getting total factory overheads as 4,40,800. So you can give me the works cost here, the final works cost that is coming. 4,02,800. This is coming to 26,21,600. So after I add, yes, all the office overhead, then this amount gives me the cost of production as 28,93,600. Adding all the selling and distribution overheads, hundred 30 lakh 63,200 is your cost of sales. You are given the sales value in the question. So the difference between the two is giving you the profit. This was the missing value, 96,400. So this is how a detailed cost sheet is prepared. Please complete the solution. If there's any doubt, you can ask. I'll just